And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for November 24th. Paddy remains a short-lived tropical storm, well, not anymore, as it is now declared a remnant low in the Australian region. The number of storms so far this year remains at 88, which means we are still 4 away from the yearly average of 92 on day 328 of 2021. Day 176 of hurricane season in the Atlantic. Once again, the no storms active graphic is up, which means that once again, there is no activity expected here within the next 5 days. Now, it does remain to be said that less than a week of hurricane season remains in this part of the world. So hopefully the Atlantic is done for the year and we won't be seeing our next tropical system until the beginning of next hurricane season. Similarly, the Eastern Pacific on day 192 of hurricane season is also quiet, as yet again no storms are active in this part of the world, also with 6 days of hurricane season remaining in this part of the world. Over in the West Pacific, once again, it is still fairly quiet here, as I keep repeating myself, no systems are active here. No storms, no typhoons, no areas of interest, no invests, no nothing is active here in this part of the world. 93A is putting up a valiant fight as it is still not quite done yet. However, we still do not expect it to form, and as such we maintain a 0% chance of formation on this invest. Invest 91S still remains in the open southwest Indian Ocean, but all guidance on the system is not looking favourable for this system. Hence, we have followed suit and dropped support for this system down to a 0% chance of formation. As expected, Paddy didn't last long and is now on its last legs as it drifts westward harmlessly out to sea, where it will dissipate. And once again, nothing is active here in the South Pacific. It's still warming up in this part of the world. Looking at the satellite imagery for the Atlantic, once again, there really is not much to write home about apart from this time a frontal system with quite a lot of thunderstorm activity. Over in the Eastern Pacific, it's still pretty quiet here yet again, with not a lot of activity of any kind going on here. The West Pacific is also fairly quiet once again. There is still not a lot of activity of any kind ongoing over in this part of the world. 93A is hanging on for dear life, but it isn't visible here. It's to the west of the satellite imagery. This is as far as I can go, so it isn't marked on the screen right here. Hopefully, this system will dissipate very shortly, and that will be the last we see of 93A. Paddy didn't quite last long and is now extratropical and will harmlessly move westwards out to sea, dissipating as it does so. 91S has also had all guidance drop on formation chances for this system, so once again we are following suit and dropping support to 0%. Hopefully this system will dissipate fairly soon. The South Pacific yet again still remains devoid of any tropical activity, with an extratropical system that remains out to sea. But like I keep saying, this is not an area of interest, so do not get your hopes up. Jumping into the sea surface temperatures, the West Pacific still remains largely 29 to 30 degrees Celsius, the Bay of Bengal registering 28 to 29 Celsius as far as I could gather, the Arabian Sea registering 27 to 28, the tropical Atlantic remaining at 28 degrees, but it is slowly cooling down, with the Gulf of Mexico having temperatures of the low 20s along the coastline of the United States. The tropical eastern and central Pacific registering around 27, with part of the near equatorial region of the central Pacific around 28, but it is interrupted by the La Nina there. And and it also remains that offshore Mexico still remains with 28. And it also remains to be said the southern hemisphere is warming up. We've just had one named storm off the Australian coast, with that area's sea surface temperatures still remaining around 29 to 30 degrees. The southwest Indian Ocean still remains largely around 28. The sea surface temperature anomalies, both the eastern and central Pacific remain cooler than average, but the west coast of Mexico still remains above average. The La Nina is still in full swing. The Bureau of Meteorology, I believe last night, declared that La Nina was in effect. The Atlantic still remains pretty much all above average. The West Pacific also remains warmer than average. The Bay of Bengal is also above average, with the Arabian Sea mostly at or below average. The Southwest Indian Ocean still remains mostly above, and the South Pacific still remains half above and half below average due to the La Nina that is currently in effect. On this day today in 2016, the main feature was Hurricane Otto in the Atlantic, which peaked today as a Category 3 major hurricane just prior to landfall in Nicaragua. Elsewhere, 29W was active in the West Pacific and would soon be named Tokaj. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I do apologize if I did not. And that brings us to the Atlantic naming lists. We are still waiting for the first name of the auxiliary list over here in the Atlantic, with Adria followed by Braylon. Up next in the Eastern Pacific is Vivian followed by Waldo. And up next in the Central Pacific, we are still waiting on Hone. Up next in the West Pacific on list 4, we are still waiting on Nieto followed by Rai. And up next in the North Indian Ocean is Jawad, followed by Asani. Next up in the Australian region after Paddy is Ruby, followed by Seth. First up in the Southwest Indian Ocean is Anna, followed by Batsirai. And finally up next in the South Pacific is Cody, followed by Dovey. That's all from me for now. We'll see you for another Tropical Weather Bulletin tomorrow night.